The bold and the beautiful has always understood that the most dangerous betrayals are not the ones that arrive screaming, but the ones that unfold in silence. Inside spaces that were once considered inviolable, the moment Steffi sees Taylor and Deacon standing too close to one another is not merely a shock, nor is it a simple flare of jealousy or moral outrage. It is something far more destabilizing, far more personal. It is the sensation of having the final safe structure in her life fracture without warning. For Steffi, Taylor's presence has always represented a moral sanctuary, a place where chaos could not enter, where lines were drawn clearly and honored without question. To witness that sanctuary compromised is to feel unmoored, stripped of certainty, and forced into a reckoning she never wanted to face. What Steffi experiences in that moment is not just disappointment, but a profound sense of betrayal that reaches beyond individual behavior and into the architecture of her identity. Taylor is not simply her mother. She is the embodiment of the values Steffi has leaned on when everything else felt unstable. Taylor was the proof that redemption could be disciplined, that mistakes could be acknowledged without being repeated, that integrity was not merely a concept, but a daily practice. Seeing Taylor in a moment of emotional intimacy with Deacon fractures that belief in an instant. The betrayal cuts deeper because it occurs in what Steffi believed to be the one place where she did not need to be vigilant. This is not a public scandal she can manage or a business crisis she can contain. This is a wound inflicted inside the walls she trusted most. The psychological impact of this realization is immediate and overwhelming. Steffi does not simply register what she sees. She feels it ripple through her entire sense of self. Her mind races, not just through the implications of Taylor's behavior, but through a lifetime of memories now cast in a different light. Moments of guidance, lessons about boundaries and ethics, assurances that some lines must never be crossed, all resurface with a bitter aftertaste. The question is no longer whether Taylor has made a mistake, but whether the framework Steffi has used to navigate the world has been fundamentally flawed. When a moral anchor drifts, everything attached to it is thrown into question. In that suspended moment, Steffi is forced to confront an impossible choice, one that has haunted generations before her. She must decide whether to protect the image of her family or confront the truth, knowing that either path carries consequences she cannot fully predict or control. Protecting the family image would mean silence, containment, perhaps even rationalization. It would require Steffi to compartmentalize what she has seen, to convince herself that proximity does not equal transgression, that intention matters more than appearance. It would allow her to preserve a version of Taylor that feels safer, more familiar, less destabilizing. Yet that choice would demand that Steffi betray her own principles, the very ones she has fought to uphold in every other aspect of her life. Choosing to confront the truth, on the other hand, would mean exposing a fracture that could shatter not only Taylor's reputation, but Steffi's sense of familial cohesion. It would mean acknowledging that the person she trusted most has crossed, or is dangerously close to crossing, a line that Steffi herself has defended relentlessly. That confrontation would not be neat or contained. It would unleash pain, defensiveness, and a cascade of consequences that could extend far beyond the individuals directly involved. Steffi understands this instinctively. She has seen what happens when truths are dragged into the open without preparation. Yet she also knows that silence has its own cost, one that corrodes integrity from the inside out. What complicates this choice further is the emotional context surrounding Taylor and Deacon themselves. This is not a simple narrative of temptation or recklessness. Taylor's internal struggle has been building quietly, layered with denial, restraint, and an increasingly fragile sense of control. She did not wake up intending to betray her values. Her connection with Deacon developed in the shadows of shared vulnerability, mutual recognition, and the subtle erosion of boundaries that felt harmless until it was not. Deacon, for his part, is drawn to Taylor not as a conquest, but as a mirror, someone who understands his flaws without immediately condemning him. Their closeness is fueled by the dangerous belief that being misunderstood by the world somehow makes their connection purer, more justified, more real. Steffi senses this dynamic almost immediately, even if she cannot yet articulate it. The intimacy she witnesses is not performative or impulsive. It is charged with a sense of emotional inevitability, the kind that suggests this connection has been forming long before she happened upon it. That realization is perhaps the most unsettling of all. It means that whatever Steffi chooses to do next will not simply interrupt a moment, but potentially accelerate a trajectory already in motion. Her reaction, rather than stopping what is happening, could inadvertently give it momentum. If Steffi responds with anger and condemnation, she risks pushing Taylor into a defensive posture that isolates her further. Taylor, already wrestling with guilt and confusion, could interpret Steffi's reaction not as concern but as rejection. In that emotional vacuum, Deacon becomes not just a source of connection, but a refuge. The world turns against them, or so it feels, and that shared sense of being misunderstood becomes the glue that binds them tighter together. History has shown time and again that alliances forged under pressure, framed as love against the world, are among the most volatile and destructive. They thrive on opposition, feeding off the belief that everyone else simply does not understand. Steffi is acutely aware of this pattern, even if she has never articulated it in these terms. She has seen how relationships become more intense, more reckless, when they are fueled by secrecy and defiance. She understands that by positioning herself as an antagonist, she could unintentionally validate the very narrative that draws Taylor and Deacon closer. That awareness paralyzes her, forcing her to weigh not just what feels right, but what will actually prevent further damage. The irony is brutal. The instinct to protect her family might be the very thing that fractures it beyond repair. At the same time, Steffi cannot simply ignore what she has seen. Doing so would require her to suppress her own emotional truth, to carry the burden of knowledge alone while pretending nothing has changed. That kind of silence is not passive, it is active self-betrayal. It would mean watching Taylor continue down a path that Steffi believes will end in pain, not only for Sheila, for Deacon's family, and for the broader community, but for Taylor herself. Steffi's love for her mother is not abstract or conditional. It is fierce, protective, and deeply rooted. That love compels her to act, even when action risks backlash. The tragedy of this moment lies in the fact that there is no path that does not involve loss. Whatever Steffi chooses, something will be sacrificed. If she confronts Taylor, she may lose the version of her mother she has always relied on. If she stays silent, she may lose her own sense of integrity and agency. If she seeks a middle ground, attempting to manage the situation quietly, she risks misjudging the emotional forces at play and allowing the situation to escalate beyond containment. This is not a problem that can be solved through logic or strategy alone. It is an emotional crucible that demands a choice without guarantees. As Steffi stands at this crossroads, the broader dynamics of the situation continue to shift around her. Taylor, sensing tension even if she does not yet know its source, may begin to lean more heavily on Deacon, interpreting his presence as stability in a world that suddenly feels hostile. Deacon, attuned to emotional undercurrents, may perceive Steffi's shock or disapproval as confirmation that their connection is something that must be defended rather than questioned. In this way, Steffi's reaction, even before it is fully formed, begins to shape the narrative in ways she cannot fully control. The concept of an us-against-the-world alliance has always been one of the most dangerous forces in this universe. It transforms accountability into persecution and reframes concern as hostility. When two people convince themselves that everyone else is an enemy, they stop listening to reason and start justifying behavior they would once have rejected. Steffi knows this, not intellectually but viscerally. She has lived through the fallout of such alliances, watched them burn through families, careers, and lives with devastating efficiency. The fear that Taylor and Deacon could slide into that dynamic is not abstract. It is immediate and deeply personal. This fear intensifies Steffi's internal conflict, sharpening every thought and emotion. She is not merely reacting to what she has seen, she is anticipating what it could become. The weight of that anticipation is crushing. It forces her to confront the limits of her influence, the reality that even the strongest intentions cannot always redirect the course of other people's choices. For someone accustomed to taking decisive action, to stepping in and asserting control when situations spiral, this uncertainty is profoundly unsettling. Steffi is used to being the one who acts, who intervenes, who stabilizes. Now she must consider whether intervention itself could be the accelerant. What makes this moment especially cruel is that Steffi's motivations are fundamentally rooted in love and protection. She is not driven by jealousy or moral superiority. Her shock is not about judgment, but about loss. She feels as though something sacred has been taken from her, something she did not even realize she was still holding onto until it was threatened. That sense of loss fuels her anger, but it also deepens her compassion. She understands, perhaps more than she wants to admit, how loneliness and vulnerability can blur boundaries. This understanding does not excuse Taylor's behavior, but it complicates Steffi's response, making it harder to reduce the situation to right and wrong. As the hours pass and the initial shock begins to settle, Steffi is left with the quiet aftermath of realization. This is not a crisis that will resolve itself through time or avoidance. Whatever she does next will reverberate outward, shaping relationships and trajectories in ways that cannot be undone. She is standing at the edge of a narrative shift, one where her role could transform from protector to catalyst, from daughter to judge, from stabilizing force to destabilizing one. The awareness of that potential weighs heavily on her, forcing her to confront the uncomfortable truth that even the best intentions can produce unintended consequences. In the world she inhabits, truth is rarely neutral. It is a weapon, a shield, a burden, and a catalyst all at once. Steffi must decide how to wield it, knowing that once released, it will not return quietly to its place. The image of Taylor and Deacon standing too close lingers in her mind, not as a single moment, but as a symbol of everything now at stake. It represents the collapse of certainty, the danger of secrecy, and the fragile line between protection and control. As this chapter closes, the tension does not dissipate, it condenses. Steffi has not yet spoken, not yet confronted, not yet chosen her path. But the choice is coming, inevitable and irreversible. Whether she acts to preserve the illusion of safety or to expose a truth that could fracture her family, the consequences will be profound. And in the cruelest twist of all, the very act of trying to protect those she loves could be the spark that drives them into the most dangerous alliance of all, one forged in defiance, secrecy, and the belief that love must be defended against the world. In The Bold and the Beautiful, it is always these moments suspended between silence and action that determine who will be changed forever once the storm finally breaks. The Bold and the Beautiful has always understood that its most devastating moments rarely arrive with explosions or public confrontations. Instead, they seep in quietly through half-open doors, whispered confessions, and realizations that come one heartbeat too late. The episode, airing on Wednesday, January 7th, is constructed precisely on that kind of slow-burning tension, where emotional fault lines intersect across different spaces, drawing characters toward consequences they sense but cannot yet fully escape. On this day, destinies quietly collide as Steffi Forrester Finnegan walks into a truth she was never meant to see. Taylor Hayes drifts dangerously close to crossing an ethical and emotional boundary. Deacon Sharp follows his instincts rather than his restraint, and Sheila Sharp reaches out for help with the desperation of someone who feels the ground beginning to crack beneath her feet. These storylines do not exist in isolation. They echo and amplify one another, forming a portrait of longing, denial, and the high cost of silence. For Sheila, the episode begins not with confrontation, but with vulnerability. She has lived most of her life in a state of defense, always anticipating rejection, betrayal, or judgment. Even when she appears calm, there is usually a strategy beneath the surface, a calculation meant to protect her from the pain she expects to come. Yet now, something has shifted. Since the dramatic events surrounding Luna Nozawa, Sheila has found herself in an unfamiliar position, cautiously building a connection with Lee Finnegan that does not rely on manipulation or fear. Their bond is strange, born not of trust earned over years, but of shared moments when survival required understanding rather than condemnation. Over time, that bond has softened into something that almost resembles friendship, or at least mutual recognition of humanity. It is this fragile connection that Sheila leans on when her sense of stability begins to falter. She reaches out to Lee not as a schemer or a provocateur, but as a woman who feels herself being edged out of a family she desperately wants to belong to. Deacon's children, his extended world, the life he is trying to hold together, all seem to exist behind a barrier Sheila cannot quite break through. She feels tolerated rather than embraced, present but never fully welcomed. The old Sheila might have responded with anger or threats, but this Sheila is trying something different. She calls Lee and summons her to an urgent meeting, not to plot, but to confess her fear that no matter how much she tries to change, she will never truly be enough. When Lee arrives, her first instinct is confusion. Sheila does not usually ask for help unless there is something tangible to gain. Yet, as the conversation unfolds, Lee begins to understand that what Sheila is seeking cannot be taken or forced. Sheila speaks about Deacon's family, about the unspoken walls she feels closing in, about the quiet dread that she is losing Deacon not through a dramatic rupture, but through emotional distance. Her voice carries less accusation than exhaustion. She wants to know how to be accepted, how to soften the resistance she senses around her, how to belong without constantly proving she deserves to exist in someone else's life. Lee listens carefully, offering reassurance tempered with realism. She acknowledges that trust takes time, especially when history is heavy, but she also encourages Sheila to recognize the progress she has already made. The fact that she is asking for guidance rather than demanding loyalty is itself evidence of growth. Yet, even as Lee speaks, there is an unspoken irony hanging in the air. Lee is comforting Sheila under the assumption that the biggest threat to her happiness is external judgment, unaware that the true danger may be forming much closer to home. The advice Lee gives is sincere, but incomplete, because it is built on the belief that the people Sheila trusts most are not keeping secrets that could shatter her fragile sense of security. While Sheila seeks stability through honesty, Taylor is losing hers through denial. In her office, a space meant to represent professionalism, clarity, and ethical boundaries, she finds herself facing emotions she has tried desperately to suppress. Deacon continues to press her, not aggressively, but persistently, asking her to acknowledge what exists between them. He is not content with half-truths or carefully worded deflections. Deacon has always been a man driven by emotional instinct, and now that instinct tells him that Taylor feels something more than she is willing to admit. Taylor resists, clinging to the identity she has spent years rebuilding: the ethical doctor, the stabilizing presence, the woman who learned from past mistakes. She knows better than anyone how destructive blurred boundaries can be, how easily one compromised decision can unravel years of hard-earned credibility. Yet knowledge does not erase feeling. The more she tries to maintain distance, the more aware she becomes of the pull drawing her closer to Deacon. It is not merely attraction, it is recognition, the sense of being truly seen by someone who understands brokenness not as a flaw, but as a shared language. Even if Taylor does not fully confess what she feels, Deacon senses it. He reads her pauses, her guarded expressions, the way her composure falters just slightly when he challenges her emotional restraint. Their connection deepens not through words, but through the charged silence that settles between them. When they step into that dangerous space together, the moment becomes intimate not because of what they do, but because of what they almost do. The risk lies in how close they come to crossing a line that, once crossed, cannot be redrawn. This is not reckless passion. It is the slow erosion of resolve, the kind that convinces people they are still in control even as they move towards something irreversible. Across town, at Forrester Creations, Steffi is navigating a different kind of tension, one rooted in responsibility rather than desire. She updates Carter Walton and Ridge Forrester on Daphne Rose's decision to return to Paris, and the news lands with immediate force. Both men are stunned, not just because of Daphne's departure, but because of what it represents. Paris is not merely a location. It is separation, distance, and the possibility that something unfinished will be left unresolved. Ridge processes the information with a mix of disbelief and resignation, aware that control is slipping from his grasp in more ways than one. Carter, however, reacts with urgency. For Carter, Daphne's decision feels personal. He is not prepared to let her walk away without understanding why, without fighting for the connection he believes they are building. His instinct is to confront the issue head-on, to challenge her choice and convince her to stay. Soon enough, he corners Daphne in the showroom, pressing her to explain why Paris feels more compelling than the life she has begun to form here. His questioning is intense, driven by fear masked as determination. He does not want to lose her to distance or uncertainty, and he believes that if he can just make her see how much she matters to him, everything else will fall into place. This confrontation sets the stage for what is to come: Carter's impulsive declaration of love and his eventual proposal. These gestures are not calculated. They are born from vulnerability and the desperate hope that commitment can anchor a relationship before it drifts too far. Daphne, for her part, is unprepared for the intensity of his response. She wanted to be chosen, pursued, understood, but not trapped by a decision that feels rushed. Her surprise is genuine, and her uncertainty reflects the complexity of wanting love without wanting pressure. The tension between them mirrors the larger themes unfolding elsewhere, the desire for connection clashing with the fear of losing autonomy. Unaware of the emotional landmines she is about to step on, Steffi decides to visit Taylor's office, possibly to inform her about Daphne's plans for Paris. Steffi enters that space with the expectation of professionalism and clarity, not suspicion. Yet, what she encounters instead is a moment that stops her cold. Through a partially open door, or perhaps by arriving just seconds too early, she sees Taylor and Deacon locked in a gaze that is unmistakably intimate. The closeness, the charged stillness, the near kiss that hangs in the air like a held breath, all combine into a realization that hits Steffi with visceral force. This is not merely awkward or inappropriate, it is devastating. Taylor is not just any woman in Steffi's life. She is her mother, her moral compass, the person whose judgment Steffi has trusted even when she disagreed. Seeing Taylor in this moment shatters that image, replacing it with questions Steffi never imagined she would have to ask. The shock is immediate, but beneath it lies something deeper: betrayal, not just of expectation, but of values. Steffi understands the implications instantly. This is not a harmless flirtation. It is a convergence of ethical breach, emotional secrecy, and personal consequence. As Steffi processes what she has seen, the echoes of Sheila's warnings begin to surface. Sheila, who has been reaching out with subtle signals of unease, who has sensed shifts she cannot yet explain, suddenly feels less paranoid and more prophetic. Steffi's shock is not isolated. It is the point at which multiple storylines threaten to collide. Taylor's internal struggle, Deacon's pursuit of emotional truth, Sheila's fragile hope for acceptance, and Steffi's commitment to protecting her family all converge in a moment that promises fallout far beyond a single office. The power of this episode lies in how it frames warning signs as choices rather than inevitabilities. Each character has been given opportunities to step back, to pause, to choose transparency over secrecy. Sheila chooses vulnerability by calling Lee, but she does not yet know the full truth she needs to protect herself. Taylor chooses denial over confession, convincing herself that restraint alone can keep her safe. Deacon chooses connection over caution, trusting his emotional instincts without fully considering who might be hurt. Carter chooses urgency over patience, believing that love must be secured immediately or risk being lost. And Steffi, now armed with a truth she was never meant to witness, will soon have to choose how to respond. What follows will not be simple. Steffi is not a character who absorbs betrayal quietly. Her reaction will be shaped by her fierce loyalty, her protective instincts, and her deep sense of justice. She will not be able to unsee what she saw, nor will she be able to ignore the implications for Sheila, for her family, and for the fragile balance holding everything together. The signals Sheila has been sending will grow louder, more urgent, and Steffi will begin to understand that what she witnessed was not an isolated lapse, but part of a larger pattern that demands confrontation. As the episode draws to a close, no one has yet spoken the words that will change everything. Secrets remain unspoken, relationships remain undefined, and choices remain unresolved. Yet, the tension is unmistakable. The audience is left with the sense that the walls separating these storylines are about to collapse, forcing truths into the open whether anyone is ready or not. In the world of the bold and the beautiful, moments like these are never fleeting. They are the spark before the fire, the silence before the storm. And this episode positions every character on the brink of consequences that will reshape their lives in ways they can no longer control.